Welcome to Event Marketing Redefined. Thank you all for being here today. As always, thank you for taking the time. I'm your host, Matt Kleinrock, CEO of Rockaway Exhibits and Events. And today I have Jonathan Kazarian. He is the founder and CEO of Accelevents. Jonathan, if I mess this up, let me know. But you guys are an event management platform, right, for virtual, hybrid, and in-person. Is that correct?
You got it.
Awesome, man. Welcome. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm looking forward to us kind of running through event trends, right? Tactics, technology, thoughts on influencers, where events are going. And I think we have a really cool conversation for everybody today. First thing, I just want to get this out of the way. I will be changing the time of this show. So if you don't mind in the chat, if you are regular here, if you do come on this show, I am considering leaving it on Wednesdays, but changing it to 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right? We typically do it 3 p.m. Eastern Standard, or just moving it a day earlier to Tuesday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So anybody in the chat, feel free, please let me know which change you think will be better. But starting the next show in 2 weeks, we will move the time. So just a note for everybody, it'll either be Wednesdays at 1 p.m. or it'll be Tuesdays at 3 p.m. All right. So look forward to switching times. We'll let everybody know. We'll get an announcement out to everybody, but let's get started. Jonathan, you and I talked a lot about events regaining priority in the C-suite, right? With brands and companies, and this kind of not really a decline in digital marketing, in traditional digital marketing, but the fact that it is starting to decline because it's so saturated. Right? One of the things we talked about was events with first-party data, and I just want your thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's not just that it's so saturated, although that's certainly a factor, but it's also the reduction in third-party cookie tracking. So it's making it far more expensive to run ads, to do retargeting, and that's driving the cost of customer acquisition up so much that it's making those channels just not profitable anymore. The other thing we saw, and particularly in tech, is with all of the money flowing into tech companies over the past 2 years, they were just spending whatever they had to drive growth. And again, it made it so expensive that the numbers just didn't make sense. You're seeing like a 9-10 year payback window for people that are running digital ads. And now what we're seeing is that, in addition to what's happening on the third-party cookie side, you've also got everything that's happening with ChatGPT. So you've got this just onslaught of content, written content, flooding the market. It's making SEO less valuable, frankly, and it's making everything less authentic. But the place where authenticity still occurs is, conversations like this right now, right? It's the conversations that happen at live events. It's people coming together. And what we're seeing is CMOs, CEOs are pulling budget from some of those traditional digital marketing mechanisms and reinvesting that in events.
Did you say a 9-year payback on ads?
Right now, Salesforce is at a 9.5 year payback. Now, that's not just on ads, but that's on everything it takes them to acquire a new customer.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think it's funny, right? Because prior COVID, really all that run 2010 to 2008, 9, it was digital. And I was even thinking like, man, for me in trade shows, the value of trade shows, I felt like the old school model of trade shows was disappearing because digital was transforming what was happening. But now you go through COVID, you get this reset. And as you're coming back out, it's funny that I've had numerous conversations. I keep hearing digital is so saturated. I know from our marketing, it's saturated, right? Yeah. So I think one of the things that I'm curious about with what you guys do is the data that you guys are seeing, how valuable it is in virtual, hybrid, in person, when you're running an event platform like that. What's this data like that people are getting their hands on and that they're able to use moving forward for their companies and in their marketing and sales?
Yeah, definitely. So, I want to kind of expand on what you said over that past decade. This narrative had been preached that you could target so much better with the digital, AdWords and Facebook ads and these other channels. And previously, the idea of going to a trade show was because you knew that there was this concentration of your exact target customer being all in a room together. And then this idea came that the digital channels made it even easier to access that. And now The targeting is starting to diminish. And again, as you said, it's super saturated. So that's why we're seeing this return to let's actually get in front of our target audience face to face and make a more impactful impression. But in the process of doing so, what we're seeing and hearing from event organizers that we work with is all of the information that they've learned that they can capture with events. So during the pandemic, when all events had to move to virtual, it was the first time that we really started to see data beyond just registration data becoming a norm within the organization. And along the way, we saw demand gen marketers starting to have a much bigger involvement in events. There was sort of this meshing of demand gen marketers and event marketers. Demand gen marketers are historically have been a little bit more focused on some of the ad platforms, more focused on the data side of things, working very directly with the marketing ops teams. And now they have access to, where it used to be 5 data points per attendee, now it's hundreds of data points per attendee. They're learning how to take that information and act upon it. So I can give you an example. If you're hosting a customer event, maybe you're a company like HubSpot, you might have a customer who's on the sales hub and maybe the marketing hub, and you have this customer who's attending your event, and you notice that they're checking out a bunch of sessions and workshops related to the Service Hub product. You're now capturing all of that information and setting up your triggers and your scoring systems to alert your account managers and your customer success team on how to actually then go and reach out to those folks and say, hey, we noticed that you were checking out our Service Hub product. Maybe they're up for renewal on the other system they're looking at, and this is an opportunity to get in front of them and realize that information. So that's just, one side of the coin where it comes to the data piece of what's being captured today. The other is just that without that third-party data, we need other means of learning about the people that we're marketing to so that we can send them personalized communication, so that we can actually push that information to the ads platforms and run ad sets to them. And with all the different ways there are to capture that first-party data, ebook downloads and white papers, even webinars, all we're really getting is their email address and a little bit of information about their engagement. But with an event and multiple sessions and exhibitors and tracks, there's so much more that we can learn about these people to help provide them something that's actually relevant and interesting to them.
I like what you're saying about what they're checking out. What is their tendencies? What are they looking to consume, right? That's important, right? And I think what's funny about that is I had a conversation with an event marketer about in-person, and they essentially said the same thing, but for in-person, which is that when they have a large exhibit space, they are using RFID technology. Yep. They're using heat maps, and they're just using their eyes to say, okay, what's working? Where are people engaging and what's happening? So what it kind of ties me back to what you were just saying is like, we started talking about like ads and marketing, and like marketers saturate things. When they work, they saturate it. But at the end of the day, like good old, just like strategy, authenticity, and like thinking about what you're doing always works. So whether you're in person on the show floor or whether you're doing something virtual, it's like, you got to be paying attention to what your customer is interested in. What do they want? Not to what do you want to tell them. It's funny how things constantly evolve and come full circle that way.
Yeah. And, the other part of it is, I know you're a sports guy. The coaching aspect of what you can do in real time is also a huge piece of this. So, I'll give you another example in the exhibit space. Let's say you're sending 10 reps out to work a conference. The reality is those 10 reps are not going to be equals when it comes to producing leads.
No.
But when you're using lead capture apps and tools, you can actually see, okay, which sales reps are performing in real time, figure out who you need to coach on the fly. It's not all about what you're doing with that information after the fact. Let's make that investment today worth as much as it possibly can.
Yeah. And I think even on that note with sales, I think I always say this every time, but it's like, if you're putting on a trade show and you're an event marketer, you need to be in constant communication with sales. They need to be in your boat. They need to be you need to have aligned goals, aligned objectives, the whole 9 yards. And yes, I love that thought on a platform and getting data in terms of, yes, not every salesperson is created equal. Not every conversation is created equal.
Right. And likewise, if you're the organization that's actually putting on the event itself, maybe you've sold 100 exhibit booths, you want to ensure that all 100 of those folks come back next year. And if somebody comes up to you after the event and says, hey, we only got 4 leads out of this event, they're not going to write you a check for 30 grand next year. But if, at 6 hours into the event on day one, you can see that they've only got 4 leads and the booth next to them has gotten 127, you have to go over there and have a conversation and make sure that they're putting in the work as well, so that you can ensure that you retain that sponsor.
What would you call, just on that with what you just said, what would you call like a smallish event that has a host, whether it's an association or a company, doesn't matter, that has sponsors that are exhibiting, maybe 15 to 100 exhibitors that are small, where they're providing the exhibits, not where the host provides the exhibits through the event versus everybody bringing their trade show booth like a smaller event?
Yeah. I'd really put that in the conference category still. If the bread and butter of the event is a conference, I think use HubSpot again as an example, but that's a 10,000 person event, obviously on the bigger side, and probably 50 to 100 exhibitors there. The bread and butter of that event is the conference, but it's also a huge opportunity for them to deepen the relationships with their partners and co-sell.
Would you call it a micro event? That's a broad term.
Yeah, no, when I think micro event, I think more you're doing a bunch of field marketing events. So maybe you're doing a 10 city roadshow around the country and you're hosting 25 to 50 person cocktail events or dinners. That's what I put more in the micro event category.
Okay. It's interesting. I asked because we've been doing more of the conference work that you just described, where people have come to us, and we're really trying to put our thumb, because everybody uses a different terminology for it, where they come to us and like, hey, we need registration desks. We want to elevate the event. We want, smaller trade show booths for the sponsors, essentially. So always curious what people say that, because I've heard a million names at this point. One thought I had when we're talking about this digital marketing, and we're talking about how it's getting saturated and how people are moving into face-to-face, and how people are putting money there because of the authenticity, because of the connection you can create, as I told you, I had a little story. And I think what's interesting is I have a friend of mine owns a company. They spend a lot of money in digital advertising, a lot of money, and they always have. They're very good at it. They measure it, they track it, they watch it. Well, they've recently moved about 30% of that money into face-to-face. Solely, the words came out of his mouth, it's saturated. We're not getting the returns we used to get. And we think we could build bigger and better, less transactional relationships at a face-to-face show. I thought I've not heard that in years. I've not had someone tell me that.
In the past 2 months, 2 friends who run tech businesses, 100, 200 employee businesses, have said the exact same thing to me.
Wow. It's telling.
Yeah, it is.
I mean,
and I think right now the authenticity is just so critical. Like, we're actually back to this world of relationship building and trust building, because there's so much product out there. The barriers to entry to launching a company, to creating a product, are so much lower that you have to build trust with your customer base again. It's not, hey, we're going to use this product because there's nothing else out there.
Yeah, I think you have to, we talked about this, and I think it's a really good topic, which is you have to meet, like, one of the trends we're discussing is that you have to meet your customer and your audience where they are, right? So let me give you a really good example, and then I'd love to hear your thoughts or examples or things that you've seen, because I think the context for people on this will be really good. Also, as always, ask questions, throw them in the chat, put them in the Q&A. Even if you'd like to come on video, come on in chat, ask either of us a question, feel free anytime, raise your hand, okay? So going to where your customer is, we way back in the day, we had an opportunity to work with a company. You can go on their website and make websites, is the way I would describe them, right? And they had never really exhibited before. They were going to a trade show. Long story short, they wanted to go all in, wanted to do something big. It didn't work, essentially because they thought their audience was at this trade show. But upon going and upon understanding that it's not, what they really found was these avenues of going to these more niche trade shows. I mean, one of the trade shows they went to was like a photography trade show, because photographers all need to build websites. Another one was like a multicultural marketing trade show, and they crushed at these. So what that taught me was, even in trade show, your big annual conference, the one that everyone tells you to go to, is not necessarily the one that you need to go to. Don't be the drone just following along. You should really be thinking, like, who is our ideal customer or a quality customer? Where do they go? Where are they at? What are they attending? What content are they interested in?
Yeah, absolutely. And we've seen the same thing in the event industry. IMEX obviously being one of the biggest events in the event industry in the US.
Mhm.
You go there and you're surrounded by other suppliers. So if you're going there to create a big booth and get a bunch of brand impressions, it's going to work. But
Mhm.
you're not going to have as many of those conversations with your potential buyers. You're surrounded by other people doing the exact same thing. We're seeing the same thing, where if you can go and find those niche events, the sort of tangential events, and you don't have to do them alone. Find a partner to do them with.
Yeah.
Maybe it's an integration partner if you're a technology company, or a supplier that you work with. You can co-host those events, co-host those booths together and tap each other's audience. Maybe it's also hosting a cocktail event in the evening. You asked about micro events before. One of the other terms that we've been seeing and using more frequently is this concept of ecosystem events, something like a Dreamforce, where yes, there's this core event or CES, but on top of that, you've got hundreds of ancillary events taking place either throughout the day of it or in the evening. And it's these other brands that are doing that.
Sorry, I got a question here. I was
Yeah.
trying to lock in on this. Yvonne asked a question. It's in the chat here. It says, what's your take on holding customer events at the vendor's home office at this point in time? 75 to 80 attendees, educational conference. Yvonne, I love it. I absolutely love it. I think it depends how you do it, how you stage it. What I love about hosting at your home office is you're fully in control of the experience, right? You're maybe bringing people in, wining and dining. You can create the atmosphere. I think what I would caution is, why do they want to come? Why do they want to spend a day or two and come to where your home office, and whatever it is that you're going to do, engage, educate, whatever it may be, whether it's product, service, I don't know. But I think the hook has to be there. If you have a great hook, I love the home office micro event. I don't know. I keep saying micro event, but I absolutely love it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think we can classify that as a micro event. Yeah. In that case, you can also think about taking some of that budget that you would have used for a venue and transitioning that into covering flights and lodging to get those folks there. But the other reason I really like that concept is that if you're hosting an offsite event, you're probably only going to bring a percentage, fraction of your team. If it's in your home office, you have the opportunity for them to meet so many more people on your team and really deepen those relationships. And again, bringing it back to making it human.
Yeah. Yvonne, I like it. I think you just need a hook. You need to really understand, why would somebody leave, come to you, spend a day or two, right? People are more picky about their time nowadays. And this goes back to the conversation of like digital versus in person, right? Because digital is so robust nowadays. And when you get people in person, they want their money's worth. They want it to be good. They want the experience to be there. So I think if you're able to have a great hook, know what would make them come, and then essentially you're really hosting an event at your facility. It's on your home field. You can make the experience fantastic.
The other thing you can do is buckle it with something else that's going on in your city. So I got invited to an event with one of our vendors, and there was a trial run for F1 taking place the same weekend. So they did something in their office the day before that, put everybody up, and then went to the tracks the next day. So there was another hook, another appeal to get people to fly out there.
On this note of kind of talking about going to where your customer is, right? We're talking about bringing your customer to you. I think if you're bringing your customer to you, you got to hit a home run and you got to have a hook, right? But it is a good idea. And it's the opposite idea. Being where your customer and audience is really more of a convenience. You're there and then you're delivering something. So I use the example of the company I talked about earlier with their trade shows, being selective about which one they are because their customer's there. Another one is, we have a customer of ours that they do brand activations at local big YMCAs, stadiums, arenas, big sports recreational fields, marathons, city and community events. Like they go and activate at these things, and not in a really tiny way. They put an activation on. So it's all about knowing your customer. Where are they going to be? Why are they there? And then driving value to them.
And where do they sit in the funnel? Right. So if you're doing an activation, you're talking about top of funnel. If you're doing an on-site event, you're talking about most likely customers or a couple of very, high caliber prospects. Or if you're doing a conference, and you probably have some people more in the middle if it's an offsite conference, but you have to know what's the purpose of the event and where it sits in your funnel before you even start to plan it.
I love that one, what you just said, because I actually have a note here, which I think we'll get to later, is a thought I have on trade shows for the future, which is that too many people just think about filling the funnel versus other avenues of what can be accomplished at a trade show. But the thought of understanding where these people are they at the top? Are they at the middle? Are they at the bottom? Are you trying to add them in? I think should all play a role into your goals and everything you're trying to accomplish. We said we wanted to touch on these AI generated content, right? Chat GPT, Jasper. And we wanted to talk about what values do they drive towards events, right? What have you seen? What are you thinking on that?
Yeah. So in our space, there hasn't really been a meaningful integration with that technology yet. The primary use case would be helping to write speaker bios, write marketing collateral, but you can use the tools like OpenAI and Jasper to do that outside of any technology platform today. Where we in the short term see it being most valuable is just that it's building copy for landing pages, customizing marketing emails. But where we see the longer term opportunity is you are collecting all of this data in real time, and you can't sit there and personalize your message to every attendee. But what you can do is feed that into the tools that are going to do that for you and send out that communication. I'll give you an example. Somebody might have gone and looked at the bio of your keynote speaker 4 times, but you've noticed that they haven't checked into any sessions for the past 3 hours. Where are they? Maybe they went out to lunch with somebody. You can push out communication based on activity that you've seen people doing and where they've shown interest to re-engage your audience. You can do that on site. You can do that pre-event, post-event. So there's a lot of opportunities to use this technology. I think it's, we're sort of on the cusp of this starting to be implemented into the tools to make it easier to do that. But it's going to be really interesting to see how it evolves. The biggest thing to me, though, is that it just means that face-to-face communication, really getting to know people on the other end of the phone, is going to be so much more powerful in the next couple of years than it's been in the past decade.
I wrote some thoughts down on this, and I thought to myself, okay, like what could it help with from an event standpoint, right? Probably make artwork really quick, copy really quick, right? You could speed up as an event planner, event marketer. One thing I saw that was interesting was about growing communities quickly with the AI. That's interesting to me in terms of for an event, because a lot of events now are communities, right? So I think all that, it will be possible as an event marketer that these AI platforms will help speed you up. But to what Jonathan just said, it will come down to, at the end of the day, the more technology, the more saturation still comes back to networking, social interaction, quality content, workshops, meaningful conversation, and just connection at the end of the day. So it still leads you back to the basics.
And at least in the current state, the models today are still pulling from content that was written from people. Well, they're starting to pull from content that was written by other AI tools, but it's not thought leadership yet. The thought leadership is still coming from people and bringing people together to share their ideas. And in these communities, whether it's a virtual community or on-site, people together, people in a room brainstorming, thinking together, that is still so important and so necessary today.
Yeah. I let's touch on that then, because I think that's just a great topic in terms of trends and where events are going and what's happening. Is like, I've been an advocate of this for a while now. I go to a lot of events, and the ones I go to, I am always craving for more engagement. I'm always craving for less speakers. God, these events are just lined with speaker after speaker after speaker. And it's like, hey, I don't want 15 speakers, and that would be, I don't want 15. I want 9 really good ones, and give me my time back on the other 6. and give me time with peers, give me time having meaningful workshops, right? Where you can kick ideas off of each other. I think people are craving those interactions when they go somewhere to be face to face, right? When you get people out of their house to go do something, I would encourage people to think more about those interactions.
I've seen a lot more workshop style presentations in the past couple of events I've gone to, and even in rooms with 500 people in them. Yeah, the coming together with people at your table, getting to know them, it just becomes so much more meaningful. And one thing that we did learn during the pandemic is that when it comes to just absorbing content, in a lot of cases, virtual is a better way to do that. You know, it's the same reason that people don't go to the movies as much anymore. They stay home and watch on Netflix. There's less distractions. You're in the comfort of your house. It's not always that easy to hear or see in the back of the room. But you don't get the same effect of going to dinner before the movies, right? You don't get that same interaction.
Yeah. I mean, so I think about this in my industry, right? In the, trade show event world, we have a lot of industry events where suppliers are looking to build relationships with people like me, right? And my company. And I sometimes find some of my best relationships with suppliers has nothing to do with the event other than having a drink at a bar, getting to know each other, asking about the kids, your family, what's happening, having a drink, I've had some incredible nights with people that I now have long-standing relationships because we went to dinner off-site in Vegas, some sketchy spot, right? Just things that you go do. That is a missing ingredient on the virtual side where the value is really driven heavily in face-to-face.
Yeah. And with those supplier relationships, the other part is it's not just, hey, they're trying to win your business, but there's also that relationship building where you're going to end up referring business back and forth,
Yes.
even if you're not working together. And that's been one of the most powerful things I've gotten out of the events I've attended.
Great. We got a question. Doug, how you doing, buddy? Good to have you here. Doug says, great content, guys. Thank you, Doug. He said, can you speak on video testimonials, leveraging the voice and video of the attendee sponsors, position in visual social proof for future events? Okay, so you're talking, just to clarify this, Doug, you're talking video testimonials being leveraged for attendees and sponsors to improve the position for social proof of an event, right? I mean, I would say anytime that I see video work that's authentic, I think it needs to be authentic. I would say if I was going to a show, I would love to run a podcast like this live and have conversation. This would be an ideal play, which we're actually doing in 60 days.
I posted about it on LinkedIn yesterday. The trend we've seen of people going to events, and it's the same concept, right? You've got this concentration of your target audience and that thought leadership all taking place at that event. Why wouldn't you run the podcast there? It's the best place to do it. But on the note of the video content side of things, we've seen that being tremendously successful when we see people putting those video interviews up on their event landing pages. But the other thing, and I do this personally, when I go to events, I offer to give a video testimonial because it's great brand recognition when they throw my logo up and stick it on their webpage promoting their event. Yeah.
I think, look, the idea of anytime you're at an event, being involved in the event, having conversation around the event, the term thought leadership really gets thrown around a lot, but essentially gets thrown around because it's a great term. It is saying, hey, if you're at a event for whatever marketing, right? You want to be having high level conversations about marketing. And then if you could put it into video form, if you could put it into repurposed content, if you can give that content to the people that you're speaking with, can you interview your clients? Can you, how can you say, hey, we're here, we're talking, we're communicating, we're all in on this. I think it's a great thought, Doug. And I would encourage anybody at your events, run something like that, run a conversation, podcast, panel, anything.
It's not just a mechanism for getting new sponsors and attendees. It's also a retention tool, right? Because it's another way that you're deepening the relationship with those folks that are already involved in your event. One of my favorite things I see at events is when they have a call to action, a strong call to action during the event. I was at this event in Austin a couple of months ago, and They did a 50% discount for their next event that was coming up in 6 months. They ran it for the first half of the first day of the 2-day event. And they sold, I think it was like $500,000 worth of tickets in 3 hours. Because it's the point when everybody's there, they're gung-ho, they're excited, and they're going to become your biggest advocates and help you sell out your next event.
Feel really good when you're there, having your conversations, you're involved, you're lost in it, right? You're there, you're like in the moment.
Yeah, there's so much energy in the room.
Yeah. Let's go to another topic that we wanted to get to, which is the rise of the influencer, right? I think B2C does a great job of this. B2B, probably not so much. B2B is typically always slow. Yeah, it's always slower but B2B is always behind, slower to adapt. But eventually, the fact that influencers may be the number one channel for event promotion down the line. What are your thoughts on influencers event promotion?
I think we're already seeing that, right? It's influencers through the lens of entertainment. That's always been the case, but there's becoming these industry influencers in every vertical, and they're like these micro celebrities. When I was at Inbound, I was with one of them, and this guy's got like 110,000 followers on Instagram. We're out at a restaurant right by the convention center. 15 people must have come up to him and said hi, just to introduce themselves. I mean, it is incredibly powerful as a mechanism of creating FOMO around your event. People want to go. They want to meet these people, especially other people who are aspiring to have more of a presence on social, online, because for the same reason, they want to build those relationships. They want that person to comment or to like their post. They want the opportunity to get that referral one way or another. And again, so much of it is developing relationships. It's not necessarily things that you're gonna, are going to be fruitful immediately, but thinking long term, influencers have a huge impact on your personal success, and people realize that, and that drives event attendance.
I would push everybody listening to this to say, you should be thinking right now about how to get influencers involved in your market. And don't think, influencers in terms of like people doing a dance on TikTok, right? That's not exactly what we're talking about, right? We're talking about somebody that is influencing the way you think about a certain category, topic, there's people that I listen to, right? We talked about Chris Walker when you and I were just shooting the shit the other day.
Chris is the person I was referring to at Inbound.
Oh, okay. So there you go. I listen to Chris. I would consider him an influencer for me because I love marketing. He's from a whole nother world of marketing than what I know, right? From just a totally different space. So I enjoy listening to his thinking because it's so not different than mine, but not my space. So it's people that are driving value to you, that are making you think differently, that you're able to take what they say and then go initiate and go get results. I think that's what we're saying is like, there's so many influencers out there, people talking about topics. The second thing it makes me think, Jonathan, is like walls have been broken down because of the internet, because of social media. You don't need to go through the old boys network anymore to be an influencer, to be a speaker. You can just turn your phone around, start talking about whatever you want to talk about. And if people resonate with your message, it can hit.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And it's also a great way to get invited to be a speaker at these events.
Yeah.
Which if you're trying to build a brand, build a company, it's, one of the most powerful mechanisms for, I'm going to use the term again, but showing thought leadership in a particular industry.
It's a good term, by the way. You can keep using it. I'll die on the hill defending it. I know it's an overused term, but I do think the concept behind it is very, very good.
Well, I think it's, we talked about ChatGPT, but I think it's actually an even more important term today because if you're doing it right, thought leadership is not regurgitating content. It's actually taking in new inputs and coming up with something that matters and is meaningful.
It's like original thinking. It's like synthesizing information in like your view of the world in whatever profession you're in, and then being able to relay it to people. I think that's with what is it, Jasper, ChatGPT, and all this stuff. Like, you're going to have original thoughts. You're going to have to be able to convey them, write about them, push them to your customers, right? Like, I think the concept now of like blog writing is going to get just totally dumped on, right? I mean, it's already been dumped on. It's already, The algorithms have been changed over and over, but it's like, how do you get out to your customers' original thought and original, what's your philosophy for your business? Why are you selling what you're selling or doing what you're doing with your product or your service? People are going to have to find alternative ways as technology evolves.
And that's why we're seeing budget shifting to events.
Yeah.
I mean, it's that cut and dry.
If you're a CEO or an exec, I mean, really, if you're anybody, you should be thinking about how you speak at an event. Which event can you speak at?
Yeah.
You know, that has your target audience that you can get your message out there of what you want to deliver. Because when you deliver it like we're doing right now, there is an authenticity to it. You're hearing me say the words I'm saying. You see my mannerisms. You know whether I'm into it or am I just a complete dud? You're right. You know what I mean? Like you can feel those things when you listen to somebody speak. You can build a connection. Like I'll give you a good example. I remember hearing Jeb Blunt speak. I don't know if everybody knows who Jeb Blunt is. He writes books on sales. He's a sales influencer, in my opinion. I remember the first time I heard him speak was at Zoom Info's conference. I thought he was great. And since then, I've bought books. I've referred the books. I follow his newsletter, the whole 9 yards.
Well, that's the thing. Then you become an advocate on his behalf, right?
Yep.
And likewise, when you're hosting an event, you want people to become an advocate on behalf of your event. So, you know, going back to some terms we said before, micro event, ecosystem events, but then some of these any event I would say that falls in the ecosystem event category, the Dreamforces, the Inbounds of the world, those events also have a micro brand associated with them. And ultimately, that's what you're looking to build. And one of the ways that you go about doing that is through influencers creating FOMO around the event, through thought leadership getting dropped at those events for the first time. That's why if you're applying to be a speaker at an event, you'll often see, hey, we need an original topic, an original presentation that you haven't communicated or shared before, right? Because there's the press that comes out around those concepts and those ideas. And ultimately, that's enabling you to create a brand around that experience that people are going to talk about and drive more attention towards, and then drive attention towards, call it your macro brand, the company behind that event.
Mm-hmm. So when you're saying events having a label, you're talking of essentially like HubSpot, Inbound, right? Like South by Southwest, like these events taking they end up having their own brand to them.
Oh, absolutely. When somebody talks about going to the Salesforce event, they don't say I'm going to the Salesforce event. They say I'm going to Dreamforce, right? You say I'm going to Inbound, not I'm going to HubSpot.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
Or AWS reInvent, right? I mean, there's so many of these events where like it's just called reInvent, but there's so many of these events where the brand is an entity in itself.
You mentioned something earlier, which I thought was interesting. I want to get back to, which is partner events, right?
Yeah.
I think people nowadays, I do think it's a strategy that could work. And just thinking out loud right now, and I want to get your thoughts on partner events. I was thinking like you and I have discussed, like our clientele is very similar, but we don't compete with each other, right? So we have similar-ish, same audience. So say for like a Inbound, HubSpot, would a partnering event, so for an example for everybody here saying, hey, we're telling you to go partner, strategic partnerships is us throwing like just an incredible happy hour at Inbound one day with Rockway and Accelevents. That would be an example.
That would be perfect. Now, I keep bringing up HubSpot because I grew up in Boston. I used to live about 100 yards away from where Inbound is hosted. So if we're going to do that, I know a couple spots.
I'm all in. I'm all in. Got a year
to
plan.
I mean, exactly to that point, it makes so much sense for businesses to do that because you're combining your distribution list. You're not competing. You're significantly reducing cost. And what we talked about before, right? Even if we're not necessarily transacting ourselves, we've built this relationship where we're in this room together. I might chat with somebody who's a great fit for you, and I'm going to go over and make that introduction. So you basically expanded your sales team of people that are essentially passively selling for you, right? They're almost like being a scout on your behalf.
I like the idea of, anybody here, like you should be thinking, who is a strategic partner? Who have you maybe not paid attention to? Who has, like Jonathan just said, like who does have your audience that doesn't compete with you? And how can you get with them and align forces to be able to do something together at said an event? A little chat here. Doug said, good point, leveraging the event brand I was fortunate to cover Outbound conference last 5 years, collaborating with teams, sponsors, and clients. He said, strength in numbers. Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Why not? Right? I mean, makes all the sense in the world. And it should be trending.
It doesn't have to be a formal thing either, right? You can, if you're sponsoring an event, like, again, I live in the tech world, so I use SaaStr as an example, where there might be 150 other exhibitors there. You can look at the other exhibitors, identify who are the folks that do have those synergies with you, and then just introduce yourselves in advance, introduce yourselves there and say, hey, tell me about yourself. I want to be able to send people over. I think they might start a conversation with us, but you might be a better fit in some areas. And then they're going to do the same with you, right? It doesn't have to be this big premeditated thing or expensive thing. It's just build those relationships.
Yeah, truly does. I'm trying to think where I want to skip to next here, because I have a couple things I want to get to, but let's talk about some changes that you want to see, right? From an event standpoint, moving into this future, like what are changes that you think you're seeing, you would kind of hope to see, or maybe ones that you just want to convey to people listening to this to say like, hey, these are changes you should be making.
Yeah. The two that are, I'd say, the most frustrating to me, one I mentioned already, which is when events don't have a call to action. They don't know what they're trying to get out of that event, where it sits in the funnel, what they ultimately want to happen. And I brought up the case before where this was a business where they made money off of hosting events. They wanted to get people to register for the next event, and they did a damn good job of making that happen. Another thing is when you're trying to build a micro brand around an event, if you do that once a year, it's not going to happen, or it's going to take a very, very long time to happen. But once you identify, okay, this is my tentpole, my flagship event, how can I bolster that up throughout the year and build a community around that? And a community doesn't have to be a Slack channel or Discord channel or something online. It can also be a series of smaller micro events. Maybe it is that city tour that gives you content to talk about every other week throughout the year. Or maybe it is virtual events. But those more field marketing style events help you to build the brand around that experience and ultimately make that into its own entity.
I think you really should be thinking about like, okay, if you're going to host something or you're going to have an event, I mean, my gosh, like once you go through all the struggle to do it, you got to be looking to grow it. You got to be looking to make it better. So to me, it just says like, hey, if you're going to host something, you need to deliver an experience, and B, you need to deliver value. And I think obviously we could dive into that. I think it's networking, it's engagement, education, right? You can go on and on what that looks like, but that makes growth. If you get people to an event, just getting the event off and running is not enough. The event's got to be really, really good. Like people are like more, what's the term? Like this, like using like discernment, I guess would be the term. Like they're not just going to anything anymore. They're not just traveling, just to travel for business travel. So if you're going to get people out, make it valuable. And that goes back to knowing your audience, because then you're seeing the really good events grow. They build a brand. They develop a name. People want to be there. The community almost formulates naturally around it, but the experience has got to be there.
And ultimately, when you do that right, you win mind share.
Yep.
You're staying top of mind throughout the year. And when somebody thinks about whatever that topic might be, they're thinking about you and your event and what they learn there and how that's a network that they can tap.
Yeah. One change I want to see is what I referred to earlier is in trade shows, is people who are going to exhibit, is people get so stuck on adding people into the top of the funnel, And I think this day and age now is like, people don't just go to the trade show because they've always gone to the trade show. Like that mentality is gone. The days are over. People are questioning why they go, where they go. Executives are asking more questions about like, why are we here? Why have we spent $250,000? What are we doing? And it's like, you should be thinking about, this should be a way to get customer feedback, right? Number one, so many of our customers going to trade shows are like, oh, our customer's there. Okay, well, don't ignore your customer just for new prospects. So how do you get customer feedback? We touched on this earlier with Doug's question. How do you create press? You should be creating a shitload of press when you are at a trade show. without question, right? You should be looking to find partners. Like I mentioned about Jonathan's company and mine. You should be looking for people like that, okay, in the room. And then the last is that I don't think people do enough is customer relationship building, which goes back to the customer feedback. But they're two different things for me. You need to have the ability, if you have, how many of our customers have said to me like, oh, we have so many customers come up, so many customers come up. Well, stop shaking hands and kissing babies and give them something to come do. Give them something. Hey, let's say you're a software. Are you having any kinks? Are you having any issues? Is there something you'd like to see it do better or different? And like I mentioned earlier, like with my suppliers, be strategic about building relationships with people. And I think when people start looking at trade shows, it needs to be a marketing channel. It needs to be a channel. And these things have to be incorporated along with adding people into the top of the funnel without question.
I'll add two things to that. One is testing messaging. So if you think about the way that you're communicating your product, communicating your brand, your sales team, they're making cold calls. They're seeing how long a call lasts based on a certain script, but you're not getting all of the other information you learn when you're standing across from somebody and being able to read their body language and understanding what's really resonating. And you can be there at a 3-day event and pitch 100 times and try 20 different messages and see and iterate on the fly and see what's working. And then bring that back to the team, bring that back to the rest of the way that you communicate. And then, another one you talked about people just being there to capture leads, but it's so focused on the top of the funnel. It needs to be focused on generating pipeline. Mm-hmm. What is the pipeline contribution that's resulting from this event? Because a lot of these leads, they're going to be duds. They're going to be time wasters. And that's not our job either.
Sorry, I'm just writing a note here. So love the testing messaging. I think that's great. Because if you're going to get in front of people, you can use the language, use the copy. It can be on your booth. It can be in conversation. It can be mapped out. The experience can be mapped out with copy to a degree. The other thing is quality pipeline. It's the same as any marketing, right? You are rummaging through a trash can like a raccoon looking for the good stuff. Like that's what you're doing. So hopefully you don't have a ton and only finding very little, but essentially quality pipeline at a trade show and getting to that quickly is just as important as the flips and changes that you're making in digital marketing to find the quality pipeline.
Right. And, so we have a mobile app for exhibitors to help them capture leads. Within that, you're not just capturing the information of that person, but you're also taking notes on them. You're rating the lead, the quality of that lead. And yes, you should be looking at those metrics in real time and seeing how many leads people are capturing to make sure they're having enough conversations. But hey, can I scan your badge? When you haven't even identified that this person is a legitimate prospect, you're wasting their time. You're wasting your own time. You're not moving the needle forward, right? So focus on having those authentic conversations. Get the information of the people that you're talking to that you think you can move the needle on, but have those meaningful conversations. It all boils down to that.
Moving the needle at trade shows. I think this is something that people don't focus on enough, right? It's that they're just going just to go. It's the same old deal. They're not thinking about these little details in terms of something like that moves the needle forward versus just nobody in the booth having any idea what they're doing there or what the messaging is or who collects the leads and why. And I would encourage any event marketer, anybody running trade shows for their company listening to this, those details, if done properly, will make increments and move the needle, which is what you're trying to do when you're at a trade show. And if you want bigger budgets and you want to do bigger exhibits, and that is a marketing channel for you that works, because I do not encourage people to exhibit if it's a marketing channel that doesn't work, but doing those little increments, you can see big differences.
If there's one other thing I could encourage people to do, if you're doing cold calls, you're doing it every day, but at the end of the day, that is pretty different than standing in front of somebody and having that conversation face to face. You aren't doing this every day. You're not doing it every month even. So make sure your team can get some reps in. Do some role playing on site at your booth before the event starts so that the first 3 hours aren't them getting warmed up. Make every minute that you're there worthwhile because, these are expensive experiences, expensive opportunities, but they can also be the most fruitful.
I think it's funny. The trend that I've always seen in marketing is, okay, anything that you do digitally, people will go, across the earth to track it down to the littlest detail. I mean, it's unbelievable. I've worked with agencies for a long time with our marketing. Some of the absolute garbage metrics that they give you that mean nothing, but the tracking is incredible, right? But yet, when it comes to trade shows, events, conferences, however you want to label it, where you're putting dollars on the table to go get results, people just, I mean, they don't even make an attempt. They don't even make an attempt.
Well, now they're starting, but they're starting to, and some of it's vanity metrics. But then it's like, okay, hey, we measured it didn't work, but did it not work because it's not a viable channel, or did it not work because we didn't train or coach our team on how to make it successful? We didn't give them the resources they need or the opportunity to practice. More often than not, it's that. I mean, the number of conversations I've had with exhibitors at events where they're just not the right person to be there. It's unfortunate, but it's a reality. And you need to make sure you've got the right people in the booth to make that a valuable experience, or you're wasting your money.
I could not agree more. I am blown away by what some people spend to be at a trade show or put on an event or sponsor, and just have zero clue as to whether
people sitting in a chair
actually
7 feet behind a booth, unapproachable with their head on their phone.
Unbelievable.
And then wondering why, and then looking at the analytics and saying this didn't work. But a picture of the booth would tell you why it didn't work.
Yeah. So that's an interesting thing in the sense that I've always teetered on this. Like, I don't just say, hey, that you should be exhibiting, because I do think it's a little bit of an old method of doing things, right? And the national conference, and I think the world's changed drastically. But I also think for someone to say, oh yeah, you're right, I'm going to go do something different. It's like, well, you've never even done it the right way. You've never even put the thought into it. You don't even know your real trade show. You don't even understand the audience. So I would encourage people, put the thought into it, put the intentionality, the purpose through it, give it your best, put all your chips in on going to this event. And then if it doesn't work, okay, now you adjust. Now you try something different. You go a different path. If anybody has any questions, throw them in here. We're coming up on the hour. We do like to be mindful of everybody's time. 4 o'clock is kind of like the witching hour here. So if you have questions, throw them in. We will get to them. I want to close with Jonathan. I want to talk a little bit about event software trends. This is your space, right? It's what you guys do. I'm curious, event software trends. What are you seeing? What should people know?
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously the expectations around data have changed drastically over the past 3 years. So with in-person software, the data capture side of it's been a huge aspect of that. As a result, we've seen a much bigger shift to mobile apps for attendees on site, because it does provide so much more information to the organizer to better understand the attendees, to create better experiences for the attendees, and provide more opportunity for interaction amongst them. So that's certainly a big piece of it. Hybrid, virtual, obviously here to stay. I think we're still in this gray, swirly area of not knowing exactly what that balance is. We know that those flagship in-person experiences are back, but we are seeing that there's more virtual component to them, because like you said, it's harder than it has been to get people to attend in person. I don't think there's much cannibalization going on. The person was either going to come or they're not. But if they weren't going to come in person, still give them an opportunity to participate virtually.
Do you think, and I know we've talked about this a little bit, but like, to me, I think the whole COVID thing just gave virtual like the shot in the ass that it needed, right? Like there was good technology there. But people are just slow to adapt, slow to change, slow to try, but then they're pushed over the ledge, and they're like, oh, okay, I got to do this. So now I think what I'm seeing is, okay, they're in person is a viable option. Does it work for you? Are you being strategic? Are you being intentional? Are you thinking it through? Same thing for virtual, same thing for hybrid. It's like these are just marketing channels, people. Like they are it's a marketing channel. It's like, so you have to be intentional and purposeful and be strategic. And if you're not, how can you expect results? Like, there's no magic bullet.
One of the ways to be strategic is to de-risk what you're doing. So if you're an organization that hasn't been hosting events or hasn't hosted events in a couple of years, you can significantly reduce your cost, bring a virtual series into the mix here, start to build an audience of attendees, of speakers, of sponsors, and then parlay that into an in-person experience, it is going to be a lot more more expensive to run. But now you've got more of a guarantee that you're going to get a meaningful audience there because you've already built a reputation. You've started to build a brand around the events that you're hosting.
Yeah. Amen to that. All right. I'm impressed we have people still hanging around, but we typically do at 4:00, which is great. So thank you for everybody for hanging around. Jonathan, I'd like to close with a question. I've done this on some of my like pre-recorded podcasts, but I'd like to start doing them on the live show. So you're first up.
Putting me on the spot.
Yeah, absolutely. So my question is, what is advice to your younger self?
Advice to my younger self. So much of my life has been building this business. I started when I was 24. That was almost 9 years ago. I think looking back on it, again, I sort of de-risked the process, but I would have taken bigger bets and moved faster.
It's really good. Yeah. Bigger bets and move faster, right? You only live once.
Yeah.
I like that. That's really good. Congrats on your success. Congrats on your company. I've certainly enjoyed our conversations, right? We've talked about getting together, stuff like that, being down here in Florida.
Yeah.
I appreciate you coming on the show. I appreciate you talking shop and, driving value to everybody that comes here and listens to us.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on. And let me know when we're going to pick out a bar for Boston.
Absolutely. No, we will talk about that. I'm very curious about doing something there. I believe I will be there for sure. We're actually starting to look into the event now in terms of what kind of strategic position we could take there. Right. So we'll talk. I'll reach out. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Thanks for showing up. Thanks for spending an hour with us to talk about event marketing. This has been another episode of Event Marketing Redefined. And thanks for showing up. We'll talk to you soon.